and women's sports. A lot of people are going to turn pro. You are going to be great pros, but you can be great coaches, coach high school and all that. What are the opportunities like now for women in sports to do such things as being coaches, administrators, being in those types of decision-making positions? Do you see those opportunities as being plentiful now? Is there still some difficulty open doors because the way this is, like I said, this is back maybe 15 years ago, but she said that in the early days, trying to get more women coaches and more former players as coaches was a difficult thing. Have we made any progress in that regard, or is that still coming?
I think it's still coming. We have to apply for those positions. First, women have to have the confidence that they can't be afraid to apply for those positions no matter what the outcome. But we got to keep moving forward. If we never apply for those positions, it'll never happen. If we never reveal that we have the talent and the knowledge for those positions, we'll never get them. And the main thing is not to allow things to hold us back. Make it. If you don't have it, you make it. You do what you can with what you have. So we're still making strides. It's a slow process, but we got to keep going. And with exposure, it's going to happen. We can't give up, and that's what we have to do.
Right. Yeah, because it seems like, because as I look around the landscape, and I'm also seeing women in situations, as journalists. I mean, my last two guests for this day are women who are working as sports writers, and they're covering men's sports, they're covering women's sports, but there has been some progress, but there's a lot. It seems to me, how do you get by those barriers along the way? Because there's still instances, there's plenty of instances of sexism, and I would also suspect that for Black women, the extra burden of racism as well. I mean, there was a situation where I think the Atlanta and WNBA franchise, their owner was running for Senate in Georgia. How much do those barriers still exist? I mean, in terms of especially for Black women trying to break through those barriers in the area in terms of sports, and in terms of other things outside of sports. I mean, I think you're teaching right now, or what are you doing now right now?
Yeah, I'm teaching at Coach for Intermediate High School. So, and I get a chance to give back and mentor students and into life skills and family consumer science. I also taught health and wellness and fitness. So I enjoy teaching because that's the foundation, and teachers are the only profession that produce other professions. So it gives me a way to reach back and still be involved in our young people. So but we got to keep the knowledge going. You can't give up. See, knowledge is power. And at one point, they just can't take your knowledge. And what that's going to do is going to make you figure out another way to get it done. So just because I don't look at life problems and issues as roadblocks. I look at them as hurdles, because when you get to a hurdle, you jump it. You see a roadblock that stops you, and it just says, do not go. So I look at those little things that are happening as hurdles, because we're going to figure out a way to jump that hurdle. So when these situations come, and you have Renee Montgomery, who now part owner of the Atlanta Dream. Now she's making a pathway for someone else to be able to take that same direction. So we have to each one reach one. We got to reach back and pull one person back up. That's what's like Black Women in Sports is doing. They are in the neighborhoods. They're working with the young Black girls and teaching them non-traditional sports into golf and tennis and lacrosse and, sports that now we could break those ceilings. They'd always been looked upon like, oh, well, you can't play that sport because you don't know about it. But now they're being educated. See, once you educate us, we become better weapons. And then you'll know what to do and how to do it and put out a strategic plan to get it done. We just can't give up. we just got many hurdles that's just coming in front of us, and we have to be strategic as how to get over those hurdles to that next one.
Yeah, and I have to ask you the importance of mentorship and the importance of, and I also want to know what role can men play? Because I look at the relationship that Kobe Bryant had with his daughter, and the late Kobe Bryant, and I think, and it's just me. I mean, and while I think women would probably lead that initiative, I think both. I tend to believe that both of us have to basically be those mentors for our younger, and especially in sports, because it seems like when girls are involved in sports, they tend to do better in school. They tend to do a whole lot better in a whole lot of things. So if you can talk about the importance of mentorship.
Yes, because mentorship is important because you're able to direct them, the young students, and tell them, this is the pathway to go. This is going to help you. I would avoid that direction because from experience, that wasn't a good path. But if you follow this direction, this will help you out more. And it's just somebody that's to educate you, to mentor, to go back and help guide them in the direction they should go. That's going to have a better outcome. That's going to be more positive. And sometimes, because young people don't know everything. Even I have mentors as an adult that I go to and ask questions, So it is so important that we help each other and that we reach back and help those who are coming up in our pathways, because, and to coaching, that's mentorship, because you're not only a coach, you're a parent, you're a counselor, you're a teacher, you're all those things when you are coaching. Same thing as teaching. And when you're able to mentor someone, and I mentor some of my students, I have athletes in my class, and I go to their games and I take notes and give them notes of things that they could work on and improve in their game. So sports in my life has just continued. They still continue, even though I'm not playing it, but I am mentally playing it, and I'm also giving back to my students. So mentorship is important because it will help you work with the younger adults, male or female. And as far as fathers, you need to support your daughters. And because Kobe was a girl dad, so he was right there supporting his daughters. And fathers, think of it this way. What if your daughter was up for a position, up for a team, up for an opportunity, and they were denied just because they were female? Fathers, where do you come in at to support them and to help them and value themselves, that they are worth, they are valued, and they are smart, beautiful, and they can make a difference in society, and not to give up.
Well, Stevens, we got to go to break. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, for our young people and for people who are listening to our show today. Thank you so much
Thank you
for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, she is a Philadelphia Sports Hall of Famer, Marilyn Stevens. Thank you so very much for being here. We have got to go to break. And so when we come back, I'm going to have Rashia Brown coming back, and I'm also going to have Dr. Alpha Alexander of Black Women in Sports. We're going to continue our discussion on Black women and women in sports. We'll be right back. You listen to 96.1 FM, not the AM WURD. Chris Murray's report will be right back.
Enterprise Exterminators, located 4943 Wayne Avenue, specializing in lantern flies, termites, bed bugs, fleas, mice, and roaches. Do-it-yourself kits are available. Call now, 215-849-7070.
Situated in the gorgeous hills of western Massachusetts, Miss Hall's is a boarding school for today, where girls in grades 9 through 12 live alongside a diverse community of new friends from around the world, where learning is immersive and students are supported by friends and mentors 24/7, where they hold all the leadership positions, where they develop autonomy and determine their own path. Your daughter will never feel more supported or more energized than she will at Miss Hall's.
As soon as I walked in the door, it was just this instant, I just felt like home.
Learn how affordable Miss Hall's is at misshalls.org/WURD.
Philly Peace in Progress nonprofit organization was started to create a positive change and bring awareness to the growing drug and gun violence in Philadelphia. Philly Peace in Progress is looking for volunteers to make a change with organized programs, mentoring, problem solving, conflict resolution, and more. If you are interested, email Nelson at phillypeaceinprogress.com or call 267-529-7255.
Hey, WURD family, Reverend Leroy with a boss good recommendation for Clark Roofing. I found them to be a solid business, honest, dependable, fast, and clean workers. Mr. Clark stands by his work. Call him at 215-365-7663.
Call Clark Roofing and ask for a second-generation master roofer, Calvin Clark. Clark Roofing professionally installs a variety of roofing systems for your home or businesses. Call Clark Roofing at 215-365-7663 or visit their website
at clarkroofingpa.com.
Are you tired of eating the same thing day after day? Is ordering takeout starting to get a little old? If so, then give Premium Nutrition Meals a try. With Premium Nutrition Meals, you get to select new entrees each week from several different menus, all chef-crafted, freshly prepared, and delivered right to your door. Just go to PremiumNutritionMeals.com to order to earn rewards today. WURD listeners receive $10 off orders of 6 meals or more. Enter code PREMIUMWURD at checkout.
Buying something from a dealer just sounds a bit, well, put it like this. My cousin Ray Ray got arrested for buying something from a dealer. So why would you want to buy your car from a dealer? Hi, everybody. This is Nick inviting you to buy your next car from Jerry over at Cardex. See, they're not dealers. They're like a car concierge service. They design a car around you. Almost any make. If it's not on the lot, they'll go out and get it for you. So use my car concierge, where I've already bought 4 cars. Cardex at 116 East Glenside Avenue in Glenside, Pennsylvania. Check them out online at cardexinc.com. Or call Cardex at 215-886-3230.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent black media.
And then I have Dr. Alpha Alexander, who is one of the founders of Black, along with Tina Sloan Green, of Black Women in Sports. And what I want to talk about with you all today is to, one, talk about, where we are in terms of equity or equality in women's sports. There was the recent report of some glaring inequalities in terms of training facilities at the NCAA men's and women's tournament. And I just want to get a sense from both of you. Where are we, and how do we get, and what type of progress is need to be made in order to get to another level where we push closer with equality for both men and women in sports. And I'll start with Richard Brown, and then Dr. Alexander, you can come on in as well.
Okay. And thank you so much for having me. I just, that question you just feel like you answered the same way. We've come so far, but we've got so far to go. And I just feel like there have been opportunities where our women are gaining financial opportunities, but it's like the respect and just in society as a whole has not come to where it needs to be, because the women work just as hard as the men as far as time and effort. So it just really is disheartening to see that even though we've come so far, there's so many more opportunities for us to get to an equal pace. I see it a long, long way ahead.
I really feel, first of all, regarding the inequities around the NCAA tournament, really the presidents control the NCAA, and things could be corrected just in a hot minute regarding those inequities. We've come a long way from Title IX, but I think in terms of the next level of what you're talking about, we need to have a seat at the table where the power is. And I want to point out Renee Montgomery, she's now at a seat with the power regarding the Atlanta Dreams. And I don't know if you're aware of Karen Daniels is now part owner of the Kansas City Royal. And so in terms of looking at inequities and being able to go forward, we need to be at the seat at the table where we could really make meaningful changes.
Wow. And that's important because we talk about executive positions in groups like the NCAA, and we talk about in ownership positions and all that. So, but is there more opportunity now? And as you said, obviously, I'm not going to discount the fact that there's still a long way to go. And I would venture to say that in terms of not only just gender but race as well, see more Black women getting into these positions, and so are we at that point? That we have to work a little bit harder than to move Black women and to move women in general into those positions.
We've always had to work harder. That was the premise of over 30 years ago with Tina Salone Green, myself, Linda Green, and Nikki Frank formulating the Black Women's Sports Foundation. Title IX came into equity, but Title IX talked about women. It didn't talk about diversity of women. And so we've been working harder. Is the world wide open? Yes. And proof is in the pudding with Renee Montgomery and people like Karen Daniels that really now are co-owners of the Kansas City Royals. So we have a ways to go, a long ways to go.
You've managed to move into the executive suite, so to speak, after years as a player. I was wondering if you could talk about your journey with respect to that. If you can talk about, your particular journey as a player and seeing the WNBA during your days at the Sparks evolve and all that. I was wondering if you could talk about that evolution.
Absolutely. And, like when you are playing, you only see the game from one side. And as my years started as I started to get a little longer in the teeth, I started to think about other things that I wanted to do. And I was always one for the networking, but I just made a way to be in positions where I could learn more and more. And I think sometimes as an athlete, we are underestimated. Like people think we're physical beings. So we're looked at from the shoulders up, from the shoulders down, and not taking into account all the things that we have to do intellectually as learning all the plays and where to be and all that other stuff. But I just really felt like, the opportunity as a Black woman, I kept being the first in that room, and I it was okay because when I would do that, then I could open the door for the next person behind me. But like Dr. Alexander said earlier, there are just so many opportunities for us now, but we're still saying, oh, the first. I look forward to a time when we don't have to say the first. It becomes commonplace.
Let me ask I'm gonna ask both of you this question. I'm looking at the women's tournament, and I watch the women's tournament oddly enough every year because I love college basketball. I love the tournament, the upsets, and even on the women's side. And I covered Temple when Dawn Staley was at Temple University as the head coach. And one thing that it seems like the women's sports could get more in terms of publicity, media coverage, and I still remember the day, watching. I still remember back in 2006 when Maryland beat Duke in the championship. And because I'm from the state of Maryland, I love Maryland. And anytime Maryland beats Carolina school, I'm happy. But I remember going down to cover the Sixers the next day, and I was like, man, did y'all see that game between Maryland and Duke and the women? They went to overtime, and amongst the guys that I work with, they looked at me like, you watch women's basketball. I mean, it's still that thing where I don't see the sport being as universally, I'm not popular, but I don't think it's given the proper push in terms of publicity. Even though I think the women's game is just as exciting, just as fast moving as the men's game. I was wondering what you all thought about that, and is that a result of sexism? Is that a result of, I mean, where do you see that? I mean, we don't talk about it on sports talk radio as much as we should. We don't say anything. What role has the media played in all this?
The media has played a huge role, and just like in terms of inequity in women in sport, think about the women in the journalism field and being able to sit at the table and have an impact and say in terms of exactly what is put on TV and etc. Research has been done over the years in terms of images and projection of women in sport, and it's been very, very interesting. The Athletic Foundation, and Ms. Brown, you are familiar with that because it's based out of LA, has done a long-term research study in terms of images of women. I'll tell you this, I can remember the day they would not put Jackie Joyner-Kersee on the cover of Women's Sports Foundation book because she was Black. Jackie Joyner-Kersee, come on now.
Wow. She's the greatest track athlete ever, and arguably one of the best women athletes of all time. I know I would probably get a long debate about that, but she set the standard. I mean, she is this all-time great, and I still remember. It's interesting you mentioned Jackie Joyner-Kersee. I remember when ESPN was doing the Sports Century, and one of the sports reporters, almost objected to Jackie Joyner-Kersee being put on there, and I almost was like, are you kidding me? So that thing still exists. I mean, but you're saying that there's also a racial element there as well.
Yes, definitely. But in terms of the appearance of the WNBA and the growth of the WNBA, there's been more visibility. I mean, look, just in another hour or so, 2 of the NCAA women's games are going to be on ABC and then ESPN2 this afternoon all the way through the night. But it still has a very long way to go. And also imagery and also publicity of women in sport. And not only talking about basketball, we're talking about across the board. Women play all types of different sports.
Right. No, that's true. Okay.
Sorry, there have been studies that show that even in pro sports, the visibility in media is not covering it. So then your fan base changes, and it's amazing how many people don't get exposure to our sport. And it's just really hard, always working really hard, trying to make sure that people see the game and appreciate the game and love the game, because it's one of the purest forms that there is.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, and like I said, and I can say that I haven't done enough. I will say that on my end. Like I said, I covered women's basketball for Temple, and I had a chance to cover some great games. And if Philadelphia had a WNBA franchise, I would definitely be there, because I think that in many levels we have for as many of my male friends saying that they are girl dads, they have daughters. I don't see that push, to put women in that spotlight, and I think it's a shame. I think that from that standpoint, that we have to do better. So would that also mean in terms of us covering that maybe putting women in more decision making positions, especially in terms of newspapers and in television? Does that help? Does that help in any way? Can that help in any meaningful way?
Absolutely, because I'm sure, like, if there was a different set of people sitting at the table for the NCAA tournament, then decisions would have been made differently. And I just know that diversity changes things. And if we look at ourselves and see around the room, if there are a bunch of people making the decision for another group of people, then none of them is represented at that seat, at that table. It's a huge problem.
Okay. Dr. Anderson, you feel the same way? You share that same sentiment?
Exactly, I do. And I would have to say, Robin Roberts, she played basketball. And on ABC, Good Morning America, she's been able to make a huge impact, I think, of raising the visibility of women in sport. I mean, who had the visibility like Renee Powell, the golfer, where her father actually is the only person that built, by a black man, a golf course here in the United States. And Renee Powell played golf with Thea Gibson, and they used to have to change clothes in the parking lot because they weren't allowed to change clothes in the clubhouse. And Renee Powell has been around a long time, but she was able to raise that visibility. So I think Robin Roberts has made a huge impact, and particularly around women's basketball.
Okay. We have to go to break. I want y'all to stay. We're trying to hang around because I want to finish off the rest of this segment. We got to go to break, and I want to talk about the non-traditional sports, and I want to talk about front office opportunity and just the opportunity created by WNBA for women who, like I said, just like men's sports, and everybody's going to be a superstar in the pros. For every Lisa Leslie, there's going to be people who are going to be working in front office and coaching and all. I want to talk about that as well. You're listening to 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD, the Murray Report. We'll be right back.
Mike, how's your day going?
I'm having a great day. I just bought property on bidforassets.com.
What's Bid for Assets?
It's the new way of buying property from the sheriff's sale.
I've been meaning to buy some real estate. How can I get involved?
Register for free to make a deposit and to participate in the upcoming auction on April 6, 2021 at bidforassets.com. They have sold more than 125,000 properties with a simple and easy process. Now it's your chance to buy property. Visit bidforassets.com.
COVID vaccines are here, and Black physicians and scientists help to develop them. So I feel good about getting the vaccine. And with new forms of the virus now spreading, I know we need to keep up everything we're already doing. Masking up, keeping that 6-foot distance, and avoiding crowds. COVID's been doubly tough on us, so let's double down to take it down. We can do this. Learn more about getting the vaccine and slowing the spread at cdc.gov/coronavirus. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Hi, it's me, Gia Peppers. Tune in to More Than That with me live this weekend, or catch the show wherever you listen to podcasts. This week, I'm talking to Jamira Burley, an activist, strategist, and storyteller. Plus, we'll hear from politics and pop culture expert Mike Muse, as well as my good friend Brittany Packnett Cunningham, an activist, educator, and author. More Than That is brought to you by General Motors. Visit gm.com for more on their commitment to becoming the most inclusive company in the world.
When I think about Two Americas, I am reminded that there are two real realities here in this country, solely based on the skin color that you have, the access to wealth, and the zip code you were born into. I can care less if this white man down the street don't like me. But the question is there an institution that if he decides to shoot me, will protect him and not protect me?
And politicians, when it comes to Two Americas, have known that. They know where their votes come from, and they know where their money comes from. So us opting out has allowed all of this to be ushered in. And I think this is where we are up until 2020. And I know going forward in 2020, Black folk for the first time are connecting the dots of my one vote does count. When they turn out, the state can go blue. So now we're seeing that, man, if me and my homies would have sat at home, we could have been the difference. So Black people are now recognizing the power of their vote now for the first time ever.
Also, I'm hoping that through conversations like these, people remember that when marginalized people, oppressed people, Black people, when we get together and determine what will and will not be, it scares the living daylights out of folks in power. We have so much power, and if you don't believe it, look at how much we scare folks when we decide to be about our justice business.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent black media.
Okay, we are back. And as a reminder, we have Russia Brown, who was the WNBA's LA Sparks, and we have Dr. Alpha Alexander, who is one of the co-founders of Black Women in Sports. One question I wanted to start off with, Dr. Alexander, is what has been the major impact that your organization has had on helping to usher women into sports, especially non-traditional sports like lacrosse, fencing, and other sports that lacrosse, fencing, maybe field hockey, even in regular hockey, and not regular ice hockey. There's a young friend of mine, Sarasat Correga, who was Division III hockey All-American. I probably could have brought on the show today that I think about it. But the thing about it, what do you think has been the impact of your organization in pushing women in those areas, in those conditions?
We've been in existence for almost 30 years, and we've made a significant impact. One, in terms of some films to introduce women to be able to see other people that look like themselves. Amazing Grace is a video that we created a long time ago. Robin Roberts was the voiceover for that. But it really introduced girls in terms of other non-traditional sports, such as field hockey, lacrosse, fencing, rhythmic gymnastics. And our newest one that we're really involved with right now is being a triathlon. And African-American women can swim, they can bike, and they can run. And so we acquired a grant, and we are launching in terms of training grants to be able to try to help less than 5% of Black women participate in that sport. So hopefully we'll be able to increase the participation, on that level. But I think across the board, we've made a tremendous impact over the years in terms of really introducing African-American girls in terms of other non-traditional sports. If you look at the Wendy Hilliard Foundation and Peter Westbrook Foundation, in fact, going to Japan, most of the fencing team is made up of those kids from the Peter Westbrook Foundation out of New York. So not only on the non-traditional sports, but also introducing African-American women in terms of other positions and roles, coaching and et cetera, which I know you want to talk about later on. And I just want to thank you for allowing Black Women in Sports being here. One last thing, because I want Ms. Brown to speak. I really admire her. I was recently honored by the NCAA, the Black Women's Sports Foundation, and the executive of National Hockey League, ice hockey, was on. The first woman of the New York Jets was on. Wendy Hilliard, the rhythmic gymnastics, and myself. So there are women that have really exceeded now in upper positions in non-traditional sports.
And Russia, I want to ask you about your journey in terms of you. We talked about playing the sport. You talk about your career. You were a great player. You were the Southern Conference Player of the Year at one point, and then you got into the WNBA. But what was it? Were you ever thinking about when you played in the WNBA that you would be in kind of a front office role? How did that kind of evolve? How did that kind of come about for you?
I never thought about going from a player to being in the front office. I've always wanted to, work with kids, and I have a nonprofit, but this is a different way for me to do it. So it's been an incredible journey, because even when I got ready to transition from playing professionally, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I stayed close to the game and I wanted to learn. I mentioned earlier about being first. There were a couple of programs that the NBA was hosting for their male player athletes, helping them to transition. So I called and said, hey, I want to participate, because I figured if the WNBA is under the NBA, I would go. And they let me in. So I just started putting myself in positions to be mentored and to be in that space.
because I knew I wanted to stay close to the game, but I wasn't sure what it looked like. But the league provides so many different opportunities, especially for the women now. If you can see, we have so many of our former players that are now coaching the women with the men. So just great opportunities in the front offices. So I've been very fortunate to have people to want to mentor and help push me along.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's getting women involved, but there are other careers in sports too, like you said, front office, and to do those kinds of things. Is it important that you draw those women who are playing the game now, the Candace Duprees, people like that who are playing in the game now, and I wonder. That was a conversation that I had years ago with Steve B. Stringer. He was saying that the best way to do this, even back then, was to find those players, to find all those players who play and let them coach. Because the thing is, as we all know, sports is, the playing the game is a short timeline. I mean, it's a short time, a short-lived timeline, but coaching and being involved, even if you go back and you're a gym teacher, that's using those degrees. And so I'm wondering though, but in terms of professional sports and in collegiate sports, how important is it that you recycle a lot of those former players and let them come in, just like the men do with the women? Because I'm always seeing a lot of men coaching in women's basketball. Nothing wrong with that, but I think the main pipeline has to come from women themselves, and also in men's sports too. I think we can go to men's sports, but I think that there needs to be a pipeline. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I absolutely agree. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I agree that with the women, so many played this game. It does make a difference to see other women that have done it. So I know when I played, my coach played at a high level or anything, so it makes a difference to have an influence or somebody who's walked that walk and done those things to be in the locker room with you to understand how things are. So I do love the fact that there are more opportunities on the women's side, but even more excited about those on the men's side because the women are breaking barriers and it's just giving, vision. Like you said, you got to have that vision. You see somebody else do it, then you can believe that you can do it as well.
Right. There's in terms of a sport like football, there's a young woman who is the assistant coach with the Washington football team, and it's interesting to see that those opportunities are there. Dr. Anderson, I wanted to bring you in on that. What type of role does a foundation like Black Women in Sports bring to that mix as well?
Well, I think it's interesting that if you look at, for example, basketball, when I was in graduate school, I kept the scorebook. And do you know how much money I made? It helped supplement my graduate assistantship in that area. So there's if you look at a game or any sport, there's different roles and different positions. Officials, we need more African-American women officiating. We need more African-American women coaching. The SEC really has led that. We have 7 African-American women that are hitting the women's teams in that conference. That's very, very interesting. But there's other roles, being in the front office, being in terms of journalism, being a reporter. There's significant amount of money to be made even in those roles. And so I think with us pointing those out and showing those examples throughout the years have really opened the eyes to young girls saying, I can do that. I want to be that. I think the other significant thing, and Ms. Brown knows this, when you get in a position, don't just hog that position. Reach back and bring somebody else along. I sit here on the library board. I make sure recommendations when it comes for nomination of people to join the board, I include an African American to be considered and come on board. And now we've been able to very successfully, we've got 3 of us on that board.
Okay. Well, I got to kind of bring this segment to an end because we have to go to break. But I got to say, I thank you guys for, for just educating me, educating our audience on this issue. And I just want to make sure, I hope I covered every base here. If I didn't, please let me know and for the future, because I always want to make sure when we talk about these issues that we talk about them in its proper context. And I want to make sure that, that we try to cover everything. So if there's something that I've missed, is there anything about this conversation that we might have missed, or anything any last thing you can say about, making sport, creating more equality in the area of sports?
Well, I think putting on the pressure, inclusion of a diversity of people at the table, it only makes things much stronger. And so as a person, if you have the ability to do that, or write and ask for questions, well, why isn't this? Why are not Black women featured on your newspapers or roles? You need to rise up and speak your voice. Too many people, as Martin Luther King said, silence is not good.
Russia, anything real quickly that you can say about this?
No, and just that it is important for us to understand the platform that we have and to make sure that we are opening doors and that representation matters. So the more of us that are in these positions, the better off for those coming behind us.
Ladies, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have you. Look forward to talking to you guys again.
Okay, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening, thank you, to 96.1 FM, not the MWRD, the Chris Murray Report. We'll be right back.
Clark Roofing Company has over 30 years of quality roofing experience, providing exceptional customer service, honesty, and professionalism. Clark Roofing is a second-generation master roofer, installing top-quality roofing systems for commercial and residential properties across the tri-state area. For fast, dependable service, call 215-365-ROOF. That's 215-365-7663.
Hey there, all you ashy folk. I got the solution for your ashy skin. Nubian K Essentials all natural body lotions at www.nubiankessentials.com. Also found at Hakeem's, 210 South 52nd Street, the Wayne Avenue Health Store, 5007 Wayne Avenue, and Cultural Exchange, 1450 Point Breeze Avenue. Or go to www.nubiankessentials.com and kiss your ashy skin goodbye.
In celebration of women, Nina Simone.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. That's the only way I can describe it.
This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, Philadelphia. Independent Black Media. You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, Independent Black Media.
We're back? Okay. All right. I guess we are back. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, there's a couple of things I'm waiting on next. The next phase of this, we're going to talk about women in journalism and the journalistic and my end of it. Because in our game, one of the things that I see growing is that there are more women who are covering sports, in a way that we have not seen in a long time. And one of the things that I want to talk about this in terms of, sports in terms of what's going on at the playing level, but media coverage. We don't give, in my opinion, we don't give women's sports the kind of respect. We don't give the women's sports the kind of respect that I think they deserve to get. But also in terms of sports journalism, women are breaking through, but there's still a lot of things that women are going through and dealing with in terms of trying to make their way in sports. And so I'm kind of, I was trying to get Hall of Fame sports writer Claire Smith to come on today. She couldn't make it today, and I want to get her to talk about it because she was really a pioneer at breaking down that glass ceiling for women in sports. And it's good to see, for example, my good friend Kelsey Nicole Nelson, who's with us here today, to talk about her particular career, where she is. I mean, Kelsey, you do so many things. You do so many things in this game that I can't keep up with you. You know, I'm like, man, you are a true leader in this, in this profession in terms of journalism. But I know that still we're still living in a place where we are having some difficult time at accepting women as being knowledgeable in sports. I've had you on this show, and you've really broken down the Washington football team, and it's good that you come in here. So kind of talk about your journey in all this. Kind of talk about where you come from, and because I guess along the way people have said, nah, man, women in sports, my wife always talks about her experiences, and Denise actually started off in sports, and so. So we fight about this all the time, but the thing is, talk about your journey, especially in the era that we're living in now, with their opportunities. But there may still be some barriers out there, but you guys are fighting through it.
Yeah, and first off, Chris, thank you so much for having me on the show. Always a joy to come on, and I have to shout you out, Chris, because you've always been one that supports women and helped to amplify our voices, and that's needed. You always need allies. I don't care if you're male, female, or whatever you identify as. You need people that can advocate for you, right? Everybody needs advocates to help uplift their voices, because at the end of the day, Chris, we are minorities, whether they're women, whether they're people of color, and so many other factors that play into it. But my journey, I think people that know me know, I grew up in a football family. My family is from Mississippi. So if you know Mississippi, you grew up with football. My dad went to Grambling State University. And so I am someone that grew up in a world of HBCU sports and just great football, right, with Grambling State University. And for me, early on, I played a bunch of sports, like most people. I hit my growth spurt early. I played basketball, volleyball, soccer, pretty much a little bit of everything. And sports is kind of always natural to me. I'm a competitive person, Chris. I love everything about sport and the people that it brought together. And lo and behold, I kind of really started writing in middle school. I got involved with our yearbook and newspaper, continued that in high school, and I went to a brand new high school in Montgomery County, Maryland. I became yearbook editor-in-chief for 2 years. I was news managing editor for a high school newspaper, and then went on to go to the University of Maryland and the Philip H. Merrill College of Journalism. And at Maryland, I got to intern for the athletics department, and I did a bunch of journalism internships, Chris, to get my feet wet, to get my name out there. Bylines, I was blogging, and then I went to Georgetown University for grad school. So talk about two great sports schools, getting very involved in their sports programs, and also interned with Georgetown University's athletics department. And so I kind of learned the business side of sports, but I was also broadcasting. And for me, it's just been a lot of grinding, a lot of freelance work, Chris, and really having to build my name for myself. Because remember, I'm in the DC market, Chris. This is a very big market, and you have a lot of
competitive market too.
Exactly. And so when you're trying to build a name for yourself, you really have to build credibility. You have to build trust, right? DC is big on that. And so I really had to build my brand in the area, showing that I'm a trusted source for DC sports. And you see my logo on my jacket. So one of the ways I did that was starting my own podcast. And I think, people continue to just come and come and come because I've been able to break news, build credible sources and things like that. But no, my journey hasn't been easy because many times, Chris, people just see my exterior. They see me as a woman. They see me as a Black woman. And like you said, there's still people, even in 2021, Chris, that say, wait, a woman knows sports? And wait, you can talk sports with me or maybe even talk sports better than me? And this is what females are facing on a daily basis. And sometimes there's unfortunately people that can't get past our exterior. There's no way I want to hear women talking sports, right? And there's people that will just come at you for that reason. And so I think it's really been something that we've had to trailblaze in. That's really been my path, just trying to trailblaze and just continue to have thick skin, right? Knowing what I want and finding a way to get it. And I think that's the story of many women, Chris. So again, I think what you're touching on is so important. It's not just women in sports, it's women in business and so many other sectors and fields, because essentially we're still fighting for just equal rights, equal pay, and so many different other things. But it truly shows that as a woman in sports, you do have to be a loud vocal voice, showing that you get what you deserve, knowing your value, and then making sure you always feel comfortable in any room that you're in.
Right. So you have your own podcast. You work with the Washington football team. I'm still trying to train myself not to say Washington Redskins. I'm still trying to,
We're both from the area, Chris, so believe me, it's hard for me too, right? Because you grew up forever saying the Washington R word, right? Especially if you know this area and they love the football team. So now it's like I have to say it slowly, Chris. I'm like, all right, 3 different words, Kelsey. Washington football team. There you go.
From that standpoint, one of the things that, that people would argue over, and it's really petty, is that, especially if it's a black woman, doing sideline, Pam Oliver or somebody, is that I would hear social media comments or hear people in comments talking about her hair or and that bothers me in the sense that, I want to. I don't care about when we're talking. I want to talk about the game. I want to talk about, hey, if I see my good friend AJ Ross,
right,
doing her report from the NCAA tournament, I'm wondering, is my center hurt? Will he come back? I mean, does that conversation about appearance is that still a kind of a bothersome thing? And people, and I know television is an appearance business. I mean, I don't know if they allow ugly guys like me on TV,
stop it.
but I'm just saying that whole thing, I think it's the worst thing in the world because I think that, people don't understand the work that journalists, sports people, journalists, whether you broadcast or print, work that you do to even in preparing do those things and stuff. I was wondering how much of a thing is that have you been confronted with this whole fixation on people's appearances?
Yeah, I'm so happy we're touching on this because this is a conversation that every woman almost has to have daily because women in general, we're objectified, right? And we're objectified usually by our bodies and our appearances. It's something that you learn from an early age on. That's kind of how you're almost judged in society and judged in the world. And I don't think there's a day that goes by that there's not at least one person, Chris, and usually it's a male, that comments on your appearance. You could be saying the best thing in the world, but all they'll care about sometimes is how you look in your body. And so this is why all the time you see a lot of females putting letters out there from viewers talking about, I can't look at this person because they look like this or they look like that. Even now to this day, I'll have people comment on my appearance, Chris, whether it's my makeup, my outfit, or whatever. And it just shows you sometimes that, again, people can't get past your exterior to really know your interior. And it's the same kind of argument I'm making now about the Washington football team. I want a quality name for the team, but I care more about the product on the football field. And I would hope the same thing for our journalists. Care about what they're putting out there and the product of how they got there. And yes, I mean, television is, we see people, right? And most people are visual, but at the same time, Chris, why are you talking about Pam Oliver's hair? A woman who is a Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever do it. A trailblazer in that sense, and she's comfortable in the skin she's in. So why can't you be comfortable in the skin that you're in? And it's so unfortunate, Chris, but as a society, it's something that we have to move past. But again, as a female, especially as a Black female, it seems like looks always come into the equation. There's always someone pitting you against somebody or trying to compete you against another female based off of that fact. So I hope as a society, we can move forward. It's not just women in sports. Again, it's women always being constantly judged. It's the same reason why most of the time, Chris, women can't walk down the street without being catcalled, right? Because we're always judged on this physical appearance and this exterior. That adds an extra level of pressure because I'd say, Chris, I don't think males get judged that same way, right? When men are on TV, you're worried about their analysis. You're worried about their voice and everything else that goes into what you should be judging a broadcaster on. But for females, usually the first thing many do is say, oh, she's beautiful or she's fine. She's not my cup of tea. But why is that? I care more about this person's background. I want to know where they've been, who they've talked to, right? Care about their pedigree. But again, as a society, we have to move past the exterior and realize that women, just like men, want to be treated equally. And we should be judged, not by our appearance, but by the quality of work that we bring to the table.
Yeah, and that's, that's no doubt about that. What about in terms of race, in terms of, is it more difficult for Black women in particular to kind of break through that situation? Claire Smith told me years ago that, it was hard being that first going into that locker room and then having people to take you seriously. But in terms of getting opportunities and jobs though, do black women still have, is it still a hard way for black women? I mean, because in addition to people judging from your looks, a lot of people, as a matter of fact, I think a mutual friend of ours was telling us, was said on Twitter that people were judging her because they just didn't like her look. Black women get that more so than, say, white women.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. I think as Black women, we're always judged more, right? Because you have the factor of race coming to it and gender coming into it. And this is why I'm so sad Claire Smith is not on this show, but I'm going to try to speak for females as much as I can, especially Black women. But usually Black women, we're more objectified because usually our bodies are different shapes, right? So look, Chris, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a Southern woman. I like to eat good, right? Usually we're more shapely, and that comes into factors, right? And then you have people criticizing how your outfits fit, right? Because your body might stand out more, how we talk, right? I think there's just different things that come into the situation. And many Black women will tell you when we're in locker rooms, we have to be very careful, right? Because PR is looking and everyone's looking. And I feel like we're not allowed to have the same type of relationship with the players because we're judged on a different level. Is this person bringing their best to the job? Where we're just like everybody else in the locker room, trying to get sources, trying to get the best quotes and everything else. But again, as Black women, I think it's harder because for one, I'm in sports talk radio. Right? And sometimes the first thing people say is they'll criticize, oh, well, first of all, how did she get there? Do you see what she looks like? Like, how in the world did she end up there? And I think it's so unfortunate, again, because it's like, well, wait, why can't Black women be treated on the same playing field or the same level field? And I think it's unfortunate. Even our hair, going back to the hair conversation, many women are just now feeling comfortable wearing their natural hair on air, Chris. That's something for a long time that many Black women didn't feel comfortable doing because there was many critics out there saying, there's no way in the world that you can be that. And then also with Black women, we get judged by the skin or by our skin tones, meaning colorism. Chris, right? Light skin, dark skin, caramel. I mean, you'll hear these comments online. Oh, she's too dark for this, or oh, she's not Black enough for this. And there's just so many different things, and it's like a battle you can't win, Chris. So again, that's why you have to have this thick skin. And I think as a Black woman, your Black woman mentors will tell you differently what to prepare for because it's a whole different battleground that you're facing. But again, I hope one day we can get past that and be judged on our quality and the content that we're putting out, but it's a completely different battlefield because for one, we usually compare to the stereotypical sports person, which many will say is a white blonde female, right? And so the further you get away from that, usually the more you get judged. But this is why representation matters. This is why diversity matters, not just in terms of who's in front of the camera, but who's also behind the camera, who's behind the radio broadcast as well as in front of the radio broadcast.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing that you touch on because I think that a lot of us are going to always be in front of the camera, and a lot of us need to be managed, in management. But let's talk a little bit. I don't know how much I don't know how much women's sports do you cover, but the one thing I do see that there is a disparity, like on this show, and hopefully, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna put myself on the spot in this situation as well because I don't cover women's sports as nearly as much as I should. I've often had Melissa Lawrence Corbett to talk about, women in tennis, talk about Serena Williams, and I try to bring that conversation up as much as I can, but not nearly. I don't do nearly as enough. So I'm not, putting myself as a paragon of virtue on that. But what can be done by the media to cover women's sports? I mean, I look on Facebook. Everybody's a girl dad now. But what more can be done? Let me shut up for a second. What more can be done to help women's sports be on the same level as men's sports in terms of coverage, media coverage, and all that?
Well, first off, Chris, I have to acknowledge a point you just made. Shout out to the girl dads. I have a girl dad, and I'll go back to my own childhood. My parents, especially my dad, he's a big sports fan. I was going as much to the women's games growing up as much as I was to the male games growing up. So I was going to Georgetown women's games and male games. I was going to Washington Mystics games and Washington Wizards games because it was important for me to see both sides of the basketball, right? Or both sides of any sport that I was watching. And I think that's what's important. I think it starts young. Usually something you do as a child is something that you'll consider to do and keep doing as you get older and something that you'll pass down to your children. It's harder to get a person into a sport much later in life because they'll say, oh, I never did that before. Why should I start now? But I think the biggest thing is exposure. Expose your kids. Make sure, look, women's basketball is on ESPN, CBS Sports. It's on your cable networks. It's on your streaming services. We have to start supporting and watching it. I'm not just talking about knowing the Serenas of the world. I'm talking about knowing all the college basketball teams right now that are about to play in the Sweet 16. I'm talking about knowing your high school sports, your women's sports so early on. And I think what you said about media, it's making sure if you're sending a reporter to a male basketball game, make sure you're also sending a reporter to that female basketball game, because media matters, media coverage matters. A lot of people care about what they see in their headlines. Our followers on social media will follow whatever content that we're putting out there. And I think it's so vital and so important, because when you're not sending a media person to cover the game, you're making it like it's less important. If media shows it's less important, then sometimes society will think it's less important, because if you're not seeing it. Seeing is believing. We're thrown with advertisements. One of the best places I've ever been, Chris, getting off the airplane is Las Vegas. And the way that they market the Las Vegas Aces, as soon as you step into the Las Vegas airport, it's incredible, right? It's incredible. You see it everywhere. You want to know more about it. I think that's what's needed. So it's putting more advertising dollars behind the sport, putting more marketing dollars behind the sport. But to do that, we need to get their viewership numbers up, right? Which means supporting it, which means media members covering it. I think the fans will come, but I do think it starts at an early age. I think it's up to all of us, Chris, honestly, you, me, and everybody else, to make sure that our children and young people know the value. Make sure if you're going on a class field trip, you're not only taking your class to see the men's games. Make sure they are going to see the women's games, because when you put respect on something, more than likely the younger generation will too, right? So I think we have to put the onus on us. Media members need to put it on them. If you see your newspaper is not covering it, your magazine is not covering it, your broadcast station is not covering it, you need to make sure you're sending quality reporters out to cover these games and make sure they're in easy places for fans to follow and fans to read it. And then I would also challenge fans. If you like a favorite publication and they are not covering women's sports, call them out. Social media is one of the best places now to do that, Chris. And you can start a movement on that. I think you did something very important in the show. You said, you know what? I'm not covering that. That's not easy to say, right? Many will just say, oh, you know, I'm supporting it. And usually a lot of the people I know that don't cover or follow women's sports, they won't talk about it until it's like the WNBA finals. Well, guess what? There were a lot of games, Chris, before that WNBA finals. And there were a lot of teams that played in the playoffs before then. Follow that. Know who these players are. There's lots of quality players in women's sports around the world that we should all know. But again, I think it starts with us following the sport, not only when it becomes a hashtag, not only when you see the unfair treatment in the locker rooms, it's following it continuously. You know, we cannot only get on women's sports when it becomes a trend, right? Be beyond the bandwagon. Be a supporter all the time, because you respect females and because you respect women.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, it's interesting you say that, because I covered high school sports in the D.C. area. I was a sports editor for the Gazette South in Prince George's County. One of the greatest basketball games, all the high school games I covered in that area, was back in, I want to say, 1999, I think it was. I don't know. 88.
It was a 90.
Elizabeth Seton and St. John's was probably one of the all big rivalries in the Catholic League in that part of the country. But that was the game where I saw Elizabeth Seton down by 9. And one player, a woman by the name of Christina Black, just brought them. I don't know how he did it. He started hitting threes, defense, and they brought and Seton miraculously won that game. And I still say that was the best game out of all. And I covered a lot of great players. I saw Delonte West. I saw a lot of people in the D.C. area, and that was still the greatest game I think I'd ever seen from covering girls basketball, covering girls sports. I think you touched on something very, very important, because I think that people, you know, guys have to learn to cover these sports. Everybody wants to, because, you know, everybody, if you work at your campus daily, the Diamondback at Maryland, or you work at the Temple News or something, like everybody who works on a college paper, everybody wants to cover men's basketball, football, but they don't cover field hockey. They don't cover they don't cover women's basketball. They don't cover these sports, and they don't have. I mean, everybody wants to be. I want to be on ESPN and all that. And but the thing is, we got to train people to cover those sports and to cover those things, because, like I say, I was saying in the last segment with Marilyn Stevens and Lucia Brown, who works for the LA Sparks. I was saying the day after Maryland, 2006, won the national championship. You remember Christy Collins with the shot heard around Park. She took the game into overtime. Maryland beat Duke. And I was such a, I was like, wow, man, that was a heck of, that was probably better than the men's championship that year. So I was telling people, I remember going down to the 60s. I was just saying, man, that game last night between Duke and Maryland. I remember a friend of mine from the Associated Press, you watched, like I had a third eye. You watch women's basketball? Yes, of course. I mean,
gotta change that narrative, Chris. And I think you're touching on so many important points. And something I would also challenge newsrooms, Chris, is to not only send female reporters to cover women's sports. I think that's something that happens all the time too. No, males should also be covering women's sports, or whoever's beat that is. And I think the biggest thing you touched on, and I love that you're talking about Maryland basketball, and I'm so excited to see what they'll do in the tournament this year. But Maryland had to build that great basketball program at Maryland. And it's great on men's and women's side, but the women's side has really been consistently dominant, Chris. And I'm so happy you touched on Elizabeth
Chris Weller. Yeah, I remember that thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And you touched on Elizabeth Seton, being a Maryland alumni, went to school with a lot of people from that program. And again, it's so important that we put the onus on us. Again, not only males, not only females, but all of us to actively be promoting and pushing women's sports. We can do it all together. We make things matter. And especially social media now, if we're talking about it, we're putting the hashtags out and talking about just the great quality games that we're getting, it gets other people excited. Again, it gets our young people excited because we are excited. And again, Maryland, such a great women's basketball program, but it's like sometimes you still have to beg people, Chris, to cover it. It doesn't matter how good they're doing, Brenda Freeze and all the stuff that she's leading there. People are like, what? I mean, Maryland, Chris, they're averaging, the women's basketball team right now, they just scored 100 points in the basketball game. And right before that, it was 38. They're setting a new average record for how many points they're scoring. That's how much they're attacking offensively. This needs to be covered. This should be commonplace language. And I think it's up to us media members, too, again, to put that onus on ourselves to say, hey, I want to go cover the women's tournament, right? I want to go down to San Antonio or wherever the women's basketball coverage is, or not even just basketball, but all sports. I was happy you touched on field hockey and so many others. There's women's programs, Chris, at certain colleges and universities that are doing so much better than men's sports, but you won't see the media members there covering the games. It's like, what's happening? We're supposed to be covering what's trending, what's being talked about. So again, it's putting respect on women's sports, putting respect on these female athletes' names, and just learning together as a society. We can change the culture and we can change the norm of how we look at and how we perceive women's sports in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, we had Dawn Staley. Yeah, I covered Dawn Staley and Temple One. I mean, and we had Tanya Cardozo who coached. I think she was one of Staley's teammates that coached. So here in Philadelphia, and some of the kids who played for that national championship team from 06 were from. One girl was from Cheltenham and one from our area. So the thing is, we have to pay attention. We got to go to break, and I got to go to break. I hate to end this session all day because I understand you have the time obligations, but I got to thank you for really, and I'm hoping that a lot of young women, because we have a lot of young women in college, places at Temple, Penn, LaSalle, and Drexel. I'm hoping that a lot of them are looking at this, and I hope a lot of parents are looking at this too, to steer their young daughters as well as their sons into this profession, especially the young daughters. Let them know that you can play sports, but the opportunities even if you don't play sports. So, and that's the thing I like to say today. So I want to thank you. Where can we find some audience where we can find your work?
Well, thank you again so much. And I'll just remind everyone who advocates for the advocate. Be that advocate and advocate for everyone else, including women's sports. Everyone can find me on social media, The Real K Nelson, on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, Kelsey Nicole Nelson, and check out all of my info and all of my great shows on my website, KelseyNicoleNelson.com, and especially check out my podcast, Listen In with KNN, and all my great content with the Washington football team on the Washington football team social media channels. Chris, always a pleasure to join you. You know I love representing the DMV and all these great quality programs. But again, thank you for being an advocate and a champion for women, women voices, and women's sports.
And thank you for just being here. If you keep doing that, like I say, I follow. It's hard to keep up with you, but I'm a follow. Keep following.
I'm thankful for learning from people like you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to break. You listen to 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD. The Chris Murray Report will be right back.
Situated in the gorgeous hills of western Massachusetts, Miss Halls is a boarding school for today, where girls in grades 9 through 12 live alongside a diverse community of new friends from around the world, where learning is immersive and students are supported by friends and mentors 24/7, where they hold all the leadership positions, where they develop autonomy and determine their own path. Your daughter will never feel more supported or more energized than she will at Miss Halls.
As soon as I walked in the door, it was just this instant, I just felt like home.
Learn how affordable Miss Halls is at misshalls.org/WURD.
Tune in to More Than That with Gia Peppers live this Sunday, March 28th at 1 p.m. on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode of More Than That is sponsored by General Motors, who is committed to becoming the most inclusive company in the world. Everybody in.
Are you tired of eating the same thing day after day? Is ordering takeout starting to get a little old? If so, then give Premium Nutrition Meals a try. With Premium Nutrition Meals, you get to select new entrees each week from several different menus, all chef-crafted, freshly prepared, and delivered right to your door. Just go to premiumnutritionmeals.com to order to earn rewards today. WURD listeners receive $10 off orders of 6 meals or more. Enter code PREMIUMWURD at checkout.
This Women's History Month, WURD Radio is proud to celebrate Black women innovators and trailblazers who have helped us all level up.
Trailblazing Black woman Roz Brewer is an American businesswoman and Spelman grad who is slated to become the CEO of Walgreens, which will make her the first Black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Brewer started her career at Kimberly-Clark Corporation as a scientist. She eventually advanced to vice president of the global nonwoven sector in 2004, eventually moving on to regional VP of Walmart in Georgia. In 2012, she was named president and CEO of Sam's Club, becoming the first African American to lead a Walmart division. She focused on health and wellness by doubling the amount of organic products offered at Sam's Clubs. She is currently the COO of Starbucks, and in 2018, she was listed as the 34th in Forbes' ranking of the most powerful women.
This Women's History Month vignette was brought to you by AARP Pennsylvania, PICO Powering Communities, and Jefferson Health, improving lives by redefining exceptional and safe care, because now more than ever, your health can't wait. Call 1-800-JEFF-NOW today. You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent Black media.
Okay, we are back. I'm awaiting my good friend Shalice Nancy Young from Yahoo Sports and formerly of the Boston Globe newspaper to talk about her experiences as a sports writer. And for the one thing I got to do before we get started, WURD Radio celebrates Women's History Month with the 2021 Level Up contest. This year, we're highlighting Black women-owned businesses who are making a difference their communities. A big thanks to all our nominees for joining us on the journey. We had an overwhelming response with almost 100 nominations. Tune in to Safe Space hosted by Cecilia Cerrito on Wednesday, March 31st, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for a live on-air Level Up pitch party as the Philly Finals will compete to win a marketing package valued at over $5,000. 2021 Level Up contest is sponsored by Comcast, Bank of America, PICO, Keystone First, and Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, please look out for that. And we are talking about, we are in Women's History Month, and we're talking a lot about Black women and women in general making history of sports. Speaking of boom runs, I have Shalice Nancy Young, who is with Yahoo. She is now a columnist with Yahoo Sports, and she talks about the NFL, sports in general, and very, very passionate. We've had her on this show before, and she's going to tell you the truth. Whether some of us like it or not, she's going to tell us the truth. And for many years, she covered the Boston Globe. I mean, she covered the New England Patriots for the Boston Globe. So she's had to deal with tough people like Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and all those other people. So Shalique, welcome to the show. And today I want to talk a little bit about your experiences as a sports writer. I just had my friend Kelsey Nicole Nelson talk about it from the point of view of a young black woman, breaking into this particular age. But you are but you have been covering you've been covering the New England Patriots. You covered it from print journalism, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of your journey. What's happened? How everything what's all been like for you, and just trying to talk about your journey in terms of having to deal, being a woman, being a black woman covering sports, and having to deal with athletes who are sometimes, like I said, a lot of times guys are knuckleheads, but then again, there's some good guys as well. But the thing is having to deal with all the things. So kind of tell us your journey.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on again, Chris. I started at the Providence Journal in Rhode Island in an internship program for minorities who wanted to be part of the media when I was 17, way back in 1994. So I knew at the time that I wanted to be a sports writer. They sort of argued with me and said, well, do you really know what you want to be? Don't you want to try other things? And I said, no, I want to cover sports. And at the time, and even as the years went on, I never gave a thought to the fact that I was, I guess the best way to put it was blazing a path, or that I was entering a space where so few other women that looked like me had ever been. It never occurred to me that, hey, you're a young black woman who wants to cover sports. Maybe that's not something you should do. It's just what I wanted to do. My parents supported me, and the sports editor at the Journal at the time supported me as well, and never deterred me, always encouraged me. And, in retrospect, as I've gotten older and I've spoken with other women in this business, I realized what a blessing that is, that I always felt uplifted when I was young and still at the Providence Journal. Where I ran into issues, and this won't be a surprise to anyone really, is with readers. It was especially once I started covering the Patriots. I started covering the Patriots full time for the Providence Journal in 2006. As far as I know, I was the first black woman to be a full-time NFL beat writer in 2006. And it was the readers who had issues. It was always the readers who would question, well, what could I possibly know about football? Of course, a few times being told I was nothing but an affirmative action hire, as though, I hadn't literally been a journalist, training and working to be a journalist since I was 17 years old. When I became the beat writer for the Projo, I was, I guess, like 26, 27. So, it wasn't that I hadn't put the time in. It's just that with football in particular, readers constantly questioned, what possibly could I know? They questioned, I would get comments sometimes about, who did I like to stare at in the locker room? And, those things are all just ridiculous and absurd. And the thing that people, and I teach sports journalism now at Emerson College here in Boston. And even to this day, I have female students who say that, the minute they tell somebody they want to be in sports media, they start getting trivia questions like jersey numbers and, well, who, won XYZ championship this year. That's not what makes a good reporter. You need to have, Absolutely. Of course, a functioning, you need to have a functioning understanding of the sports that you cover. But that doesn't make you a good beat reporter. What makes you a good beat reporter are things that I actually think women are better at, or we've been conditioned to be better at, in terms of intuition, listening, being empathetic. Those sorts of things are what help you humanize these people. Because at the end of the day, as we see and hear players say more and more now, and this is something that I knew 15 years ago, they're human beings. They're football players for a very small percentage of their life. And yes, that's what pays the bills. And yes, that's what, you know, a lot of them have worked for the majority of their lives. But beyond that, they have significant others. They have children. They have parents. You know, people get sick. Things come up all the time. And those things, that's what makes a good beat reporter, telling those stories beyond, oh, he had, you know, 2.5 sacks that day after going 5 games without a sack. That's great. Okay, those are numbers. But why did he have that slump? Was he hurt and he trusted me to tell me that he was hurt? Was his, you know, significant other, is she pregnant and maybe there was like a bad period in the pregnancy where they were really nervous? Maybe they lost the baby and they kept it quiet. Those are things that a beat reporter knows and can do, and those are genderless things. So that would always be, you know, that would always be where the biggest resistance. And now I write primarily about race and gender in sports in my job as a columnist. And, you know, you can imagine what that looks like when people seek out the one public facing email inbox that I have and being told to leave the country and, oh, it's people like you who keep us divided and all of that, you know, regurgitated foolishness that many of us have heard before who dare to speak of such things.
Well, speaking of race and gender in sports, you know, today on my show, I had a couple of people who were a couple of former WNBA players, or a couple of college women's basketball players. I had the, you know, one of the founders of Black Women in Sports. And, you know, given what happened at the NCAA tournament, the lack, you know, the lack of equality in terms of equipment and you know, training equipment and all that, it was almost when I saw the video by the young lady from Oregon, it was laughable to me in the sense that, you know, this is ridiculous. This is, you know, 2021, and we're still dealing with these issues. How do you see state of equality in terms of men's sports and women's sports? Like, for example, you know, I've been telling the story throughout the show that when Maryland came to the TD Garden Center back in 2006 and won a national championship, what a great game that was. And I remember, you know, saying this to some of my colleagues covering the Sixers and other sports, and folks looked at me like I had a middle eye. Like, you actually watch women's basketball? I said, yeah, I watch sports. I'm a sports fan. I covered high school sports. I love sports. You know, that's where are we in terms, especially in terms of media coverage?
You know, I think the media coverage is growing. I wrote a little bit about the inequities between the men's tournament and the women's tournament at the beginning of this week. And, you know, the most egregious one to me was in this year when you forged ahead with Division I sports solely because they are the money makers. The COVID tests that they gave the women were the antigen tests, and the ones that they gave the men's players in the bubble were the PCR tests, which the CDC considers basically the gold standard of COVID testing. And with the antigen tests, you're more likely to get a false positive, let's say. So even in this year, where these women who are playing for free, right, you're asking them to be in this bubble for maybe just a few days, maybe up to a month, you don't even respect them enough to provide them with the best possible COVID testing when you run around and say that you're all about the health and safety of your student athletes. And, you know, Midge Purse, who is one of the Black women who's currently on the U.S. women's national soccer team, she and Meg Rapinoe were at the White House this week. And Midge Purse said this really amazing thing that when people talk to her about, you know, well, why should you get the same pay as men, or why should your pay approach the men? And, you know, she said, women's athletes are expected to flourish, and I'm paraphrasing, but she basically said that, you know, if you look at us as flowers, we're expected to flourish despite you giving us crappy soil, no water, and hindering the sunlight. But yet we're supposed to flourish. And she nailed it. I've never heard it put in better terms, because that's exactly what it is. You're asking these women to be better and more exciting, or whatever you think that might be, but yet you're depriving them every step of the way of the very things that will help them bloom and flourish and think. Basic, Chris, this blew my mind when I wrote about it this week. The NCAA has, like a lot of, large organizations do, they have a media-only website. When you went to that media-only website early this week, after the first 2 rounds of the men's tournament and the first round of the women's tournament, you could find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos from the first 4, those, first 4 games of the teams that nobody really cares about, no offense to those teams, but those first 4 games, the first round and the second round of the men's tournament, hundreds of pictures. They don't even bother paying a photographer for the first 2 rounds of the women's tournament. And that's not this year. That was the standard for them. So you want to complain that nobody has interest in the women, but yet you're not even paying some young photographer, whatever the case might be, because, unfortunately, everybody's underpaid. So you can't even bother to pay $12 an hour, $14 an hour to some young, hungry sports photographer to say to them, well, why don't you come stay in the bubble for us and just shoot all these games? Because if there aren't photos there, then these small town newspapers who might say, hey, our local girl is part of this team that won its first round match at the NCAA tournament, you want to have a picture because it draws the eye, and they don't even provide the pictures. Wow. So that's like, it's a chicken and egg thing. You're not going to drum up interest if you're not even providing, the photos and the transcripts of the interviews so that these papers can put a story together on, we've all seen it before. How many times do people talk about, oh, this athlete from XYZ high school, they've now gone on here and look, she played 15 minutes in this win and yada, yada. You want people, they need to be able to follow her once she leaves that high school. And the NCAA is not even providing the basics like photos. And so it's, like I said, what Midge Purse said was pitch perfect, is that you're expecting us to flourish. Billie Jean King said something similar in a Twitter video that she posted, basically calling out the NCAA. And she said, we've always been told to just take these crumbs, and we're tired of it. We're tired. And equal pay is one thing. You can make the equal pay, non-equal pay, but at least pay that is on par with the success. And when you talk about the women's soccer team, the U.S. women's soccer team, it's the exact same game. The rules are the same, the whole thing. So to sit there and say that the most successful team that we have should not get paid the same as the men is BS. Because it's it's 90 minutes, it's the whole thing is exactly the same, but yet you want them to be fine with taking a fraction of what the men's team gets, and the men's team's terrible. They didn't even qualify for the last World Cup, let alone, win any sort of, get to the quarters or the semis or something like that.
Wow. At least I got a whole best soccer. I got a little break. Man, because otherwise I'll let you go because you bringing it today. You are bringing it today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're listening to 96.4 FM, 90 WURD, the Chris Murray Report. Be right back.
COVID vaccines are here, and Black physicians and scientists help to develop them. So I feel good about getting the vaccine. And with new forms of the virus now spreading, I know we need to keep up everything we're already doing. Masking up, keeping that 6-foot distance, and avoiding crowds. COVID's been doubly tough on us, so let's double down to take it down. We can do this. Learn more about getting the vaccine and slowing the spread at cdc.gov/coronavirus. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Philly Peace in Progress nonprofit organization was started to create a positive change and bring awareness to the growing drug and gun violence in Philadelphia. Philly Peace in Progress is looking for volunteers to make a change with organized programs, mentoring, problem solving, conflict resolution, and more. If you are interested, email Nelson at phillypeaceinprogress.com or call 267-529-7255.
Don't miss the Dr. Emeka Show on its brand new day and time. Sundays from 4 p.m. till 5 p.m. Beginning Sunday, April 4th. Dr. Emeka. Exclusively on WURD Radio. 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Just one more step. You got it.
You're doing great. This is the sound of a nationally ranked top rehabilitation hospital, home to the largest collection of robotics in the United States, where we continually exceed patient expectations, because no injury is too severe or too minor for our care.
There you go.
This is the sound of success. Moss Rehab. Challenge accepted.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent black media.
Okay, we are back. Now, I remind we have Sharice Matthew Young of the columnist of Yahoo Sports covering race and gender issues, and longtime beat writer with New England with the Boston Globe and the Providence Journal covering the New England Patriots. You were powerfully breaking down the inequity of women's sports and all that. And I'm wondering how much of that, we both worked in newsrooms, and then it's kind of, I covered high school sports, and I made the point, I didn't mind covering girls sports. I covered girls track, which is, track and field is my favorite thing to cover at the high school level. And if somebody would ever pay me to do it at the Olympic level, I'm your guy. But when we talk about, how much do newsrooms and newspapers, how much do they feed into this kind of sexism and relegating women's sports to kind of the back pages or just on the periphery of events and not maybe at the center the way we do the NCAA men's tournament, or even women's tennis now? I mean, as much as for every person like, oh wow, because we lost her there for a second, hopefully we'll bring her back. But the question I'm wondering about, though, here she's let me get her back in here. Okay, sorry about that, Sharice. We kind of lost you for a second, but I'm wondering the role of the people that we work for, editors and all that, because I'm wondering just how we play the media. We, in terms of how the attention we bring to women's sports, we play a not so good of a role in terms of how we relegate women's basketball, women's sports to the back pages as opposed to the front pages of the sports section.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's 100% true. I mean, we've seen for so many years the data that's come out on what newsrooms, particularly the editors and the gatekeepers, what they look like. And they still, to this day, particularly in the sports offices, are by and large white men who are making these decisions on what goes in the paper, what goes on the website. And beyond that, we've seen so many media outlets are now owned by companies who care about a bottom line. The days of newspapers and sometimes even television stations being owned by families and staying with a family that understands that you're doing a community service effectively, those days are disappearing. We've seen even like venture capitalists and things like that buying media outlets, and those people are only about their pockets and their bottom line. So that's part of it. Clicks drive a lot of online decision making, for better or for worse, mostly for worse. But I can speak for what we've dealt with at Yahoo. We've tried to be very deliberate, and we're not there yet, I would say. And I think even my bosses would probably admit that. But, last month we had a series of stories devoted to Black people in sports who were trailblazers. This month, every day, we've had one story of a lesser known woman. So not your Serenas, and Venuses, but lesser known women from all backgrounds, all sports, and just shining a light on them and the contributions that they've made. So trying to really, and plus coverage of, the NCAA women's basketball tournament and what's happening with that and things. So I think we've done a good job. And I'm sure if we asked, we might find that the numbers aren't as great. But again, if you're not offering it to people, they're not going to read it potentially. And so even if we're not writing about it at all, then nothing's going to happen. So, again, the gatekeepers have for so long been white men. In the pre-internet days, there wasn't as much women's sports to write about anyway, except probably during the Olympics. But now it seems like you're doing a disservice. And, so often we hear when something happens like, well, as a father with daughters, well, your daughters see and know what you do. So, don't just be upset reflexively, be proactive as a father of daughters, quote unquote, or whatever. We hear that all the time when something happens, and it just makes me roll my eyes because, what are you doing? What are you doing proactively as a father of daughters to really encourage women's sports? We see high school coverage seems to get the same, especially in local papers, but beyond that, are you highlighting, if you have an NWSL team, if you have, a women's hockey team, one of those semi-pro hockey teams, are you highlighting them on your website? Because space on the internet is infinite. So if you are not even putting like Associated Press copy or whatever news service you're from, if you're not putting a headline on your online sports page about a women's team, that's a choice, because space online is infinite. It's not like a newspaper where you might only have 8 pages that section and one whole page is agate and, TV listings or whatever the case may be. So, the days of it are kind of the excuse making in terms of space and resources and stuff like that are seemingly gone.
Okay. We have a caller. We have Maurice from North Philly. Maurice, sorry I didn't get you in there earlier, but Maurice, you want to add something here.
Yeah, I think this last caller was on point because basically he's talking about sports business. And the first, of course, I want to say when I was talking about Philadelphia, I had a question for you last week concerning Mr. J. Norman that passed away, but we can let that hold. Your last caller here, she's on point because you're talking about business. And that's what we had to understand. Who wants your product? She's correct that the women's soccer team should have equity pay. They deserve equity pay. To me, they don't want to have a point of demanding equity pay. Number 2 is Clarissa Shields. She's fighting. She says she wants $1 million payday. Clarissa Shields is a 2-time gold medalist champion. She should have had a payday after her first gold medal. She should have been on Wheaties Box, and should have had $1 million payout on her first gold medal. She's a 2-time gold medalist. That's the thing. And third but not least, Chris, sports is a demanding business of who want to see you. If you take LeBron James, who's backed by corporate sponsors and all the big trappings, you take Floyd Mayweather, have no fanfare, have no corporate sponsors, who would the public pay to see? Between LeBron and Mayweather, they're going to pay and see Mayweather because they want to see the unknown. If he's going to win, if he's going to lose, what are he going to bring now and next? So sports is about vision, imagery. That's another problem that hurt women's sports when it comes to the WNBA. That's a selling point. Imagery is a selling point. And if you look at the men's basketball, 35% to 45% are tickets sold in the NBA is to women. Women buy 35 to 45% an NBA ticket, whether it's for date night, girls' night out, meetings, whatever the case is. Women buy a lot of tickets to male professional sports. And last but not least, I want to say this. We talk about the women buying sports teams. No one mentioned Sheila Johnson. She owned the Mystics. She had ownership into the Wizards. She had ownership into the hockey team in D.C., and she also owned a golf course. This is business. You are in a competitive world. I think the women need to take a look at strategy and change the strategy up of business. No one can compete against
I got to stop you here, Maurice, because we're running out of time. I hate to interrupt you, and you make a valid point. But we're running out of time. I wanted to give Shalise the last word for this. Although before we leave, we got about a minute left. Shalise, you still with me, or okay?
I don't. Yeah, I got booted there. I don't know why, but
okay, I apologize for that. But no, I just wanted to thank you for being here today. And maybe one quick last word on what we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think it's funny because if you follow Jamel Hill, who is one of the few other Black female columnists there has ever been, I think I'm the fourth. When I did some research into this, I'm only the fourth ever. You know, support Black journalists, support female athletes, reach out to, you know, if you click and on a story, it records as a click. And that's unfortunately, like I said, for better or worse, clicks really drive the media business right now. Support Black journalists. If you know they're out there, if you're on Twitter, if you're on, you know, you're online and you see, instead of reading whatever the same sports people, try to find a Black woman covering. You know, there are Black women more and more covering the NBA, the WNBA. Support them. So, you know, we're out there, we're all working for relevancy. And if there are any, I tried to talk her out of it kind of, because I know media is so tough, but I have a cousin who is a senior there at Temple, who she is pursuing a career in sports media. If anyone wants to reach out to me and has designs on doing that, I would love to provide whatever guidance I can, because the more we're out there, the better our stories get told. You know, that's been the single most frustrating thing over the last few years since Colin Kaepernick and the women of the WNBA really started using their voices, is that so many times their stories are told through the lens of white reporters. And some of them flat out don't want to understand why these players kneeled, why these players continue to speak up. And that's not to, you know, I don't want to pigeonhole and say that all Black writers have to write about Black issues, but we also understand, you know, we have been pulled over by police for no reason. We've, you know, dealt with these systemic things and can write from a much more understanding place and tell the stories better. So if you...
Okay. Oh, that dropped out. Okay. Thank you, Shalise. Sorry about that. For some reason, we got dropped off again. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for supporting the show this week. We'll see you next week on the Chris Murray Report.